You'll often hear people say, write things down that you do and see which of those things someone else could do. That's a great advice. Like write things down and then say, what can I teach someone else to do so I can get some time back? And then hire someone to do that one task and work with them through it. Give them training, give them feedback, tweak the system a little bit when it doesn't work until you get it right. And then once you get it right, now you and them understand each other really well, and you've already given them a whole bunch of training. Now you can teach them to do a second task and start getting a little bit more time back. And yes, this training and working with them takes time. It takes more time than just to do it yourself, but it also pays off 100 times over.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing. And you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi innovators, it's great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, John Jonas. He's the founder of OnlineJobs.ph, the marketplace to find and hire virtual assistants in the Philippines. John helps entrepreneurs replace themselves by outsourcing to virtual assistants in the Philippines. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transformational Marketing Hub, where you'll find a host of free and exceptionally useful information to help transform your marketing. You can access the Transformational Hub by visiting InnovaBuzz.co/VIP. If you don't yet have an account, click on the blue Take a Peek Inside button. As I said, it's free and exceptionally useful, and especially for you, my podcast audience. In our discussion, John talked to me about how hiring staff can allow the business owner to work strategically on the business. In fact, the first hire will force the owner to work more on the business. We talked about how to effectively delegate tasks to your virtual assistant and train them to do those tasks independently in the future. And we talked about the importance of good communication when working with remote staff and how that is different to working with staff in the same office. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from John Jonas. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, all the way from Utah in the USA, John Jonas, who is the founder and owner of OnlineJobs.ph. Now, OnlineJobs.ph is one of the biggest marketplaces in the world to find and hire virtual assistants in the Philippines. And John is very passionate about the idea of hiring virtual assistants in the Philippines and actually replacing yourself in your business with virtual assistants. And he's somebody I've been following for quite some time, and we'll get into that a little bit in the podcast. So welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, John. It's a privilege to have you as a guest.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, as I said, I've been a follower of John for many years because when I first got my business to the point where I needed additional resources but couldn't afford to employ local staff because of the salary on costs and where I was in the business with cash flow, I discovered John's service and really embraced his philosophy and ethos. And as a result, I've built an awesome team in the Philippines and still have a team there. So I'm really excited to have connected with you today, John, and to be speaking with you today about outsourcing to the Philippines. But before we start talking about all things outsourcing, let's find out a little bit more about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the pivotal moments in that journey?
So do you want to hear the whole story?
Well, let's see.
I mean, within reason, I'll tell you a story.
Yeah.
So this will tell you how I got to where I am today. So when I was in college, I had a roommate who we were talking about our futures, and I was studying computer science. He was going into medicine. He's now a doctor. And we had a conversation. I said I wanted to own my own business because I wanted to better control how I worked and how much I worked and income and stuff like that, right? And he was like, well, don't you know that small business owners work more than anybody else?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I mean, probably, but I think I can do it differently. He was like, well, duh, what makes you different? And that was kind of a driving force for me. So I graduated from college in 2003. I had a job for 8 months out of college. And my only goal during that time was to quit my job because I'm a terrible employee. I mean, I didn't know that, but like the incentive structure as an employee just doesn't work for me. So I quit my job. I had some internet stuff that was slightly working, making a little tiny bit of money. And I had a consulting gig that was going to go for 2 months. And I knew I had like probably 4 months of income there in those 2 months. And I knew, okay, so I have 4 months. I got to make this work in 4 months. And I did. And I worked my butt off, and I started an internet business that was doing affiliate marketing. And I mean, there was a bunch of things that I was doing, but affiliate marketing and Google AdSense and selling info products. And this was all in the early years of my business, 2004, 2005, 2006. And it was good. I mean, I've been at home ever since, working at home, running my own internet businesses, but I was overwhelmed. I mean, frankly, I was working 50 hours a week, and
just like
like most people, right?
Yeah.
I was just exactly what my roommate said.
Yeah.
and I knew that I needed help. I knew that I knew I couldn't do it all, and I was frustrated because there just wasn't enough time in the day to get everything done. And this is where you asked like any aha moments. And so I had hired some people locally, and I tried this 4 different times with 4 different people. And the first thing they did was quit. As soon as they realized like, oh, this is your internet business. Well, I can probably do this too.
Yeah.
And they went and quit. So that sucked. I tried doing it a little bit differently. I went to Elance, which is now Upwork. And I hired someone to do a bunch of writing for me. And that was an eye-opening experience because they did a whole bunch of writing. They sent it back to me. I had to check it all. And a little bit of it was plagiarized and some of it was great. And so I had to get them to rewrite it. And then they gave it to me and I paid them, and that was it. And then I realized, oh my gosh, they just did the smallest part of what I want done. And now this all comes back to me to fulfill this, what I want to do with this. This sucks. And so I never did anything more with that. And that was crappy. I tried hiring someone in India, and that's a different experience, and I'm not going to talk about it. Yeah. But I think most people, if people have tried outsourcing before, then they've had this experience. So then 2005, I got a really good tip from someone who said, when you're ready to start outsourcing some of this stuff, make sure you go to the Philippines with it. And that was like, what? Like that's different. And I think to me, it gave me a little bit of hope to where I had such terrible experiences in hiring people that it maybe gave me a little bit of hope that I might have a different experience. And he gave me a reference where I could hire someone full time. And I did. And I went back and forth for a couple months debating whether or not I could afford it or whether they could do good enough work. And I ended up hiring them. And I hired them full time because that's my option. At the time, there was an agency, and they gave you a full-time person, and they gave you one person, and that was your option. That was it. And I was paying them $750 a month. They were paying him $250 a month. And it was the single most liberating experience of my life. So that like aha moments, this is an aha moment.
Yeah.
And you've probably had this experience where you hire this person, their full-time job is to do whatever you ask them to do. And so I had taken that Elance project of all that content that person wrote, and I worked with this guy to get him to do the entire process. And that changed things for me, where I had this process, I had this whole vision, and I knew how to do every step of it, but I hated doing the work. And this guy would now do all the work for me. And it was fantastic. And I had to teach him how to do all of it. but that was okay. You know, I was teaching instead of doing the work myself. And that probably took a little bit longer to teach it than to do it. But I only had to teach it once.
Yeah. And presumably you were documenting everything along the way so that it became scalable as well.
Yeah, right. So that was where like a light bulb turned on to me, where I realized I have replaced myself in this area. And there are now like two of me where he does this thing and I had taught him to do another thing. And those were two things that I had previously been doing or trying to do. And I didn't have to deal with them anymore. And so I was able to focus on more important stuff. So, you know, that was 14 years ago. I then hired someone else and I hired someone else. And today I have 24 people working for me, all in the Philippines, all full-time, or there's a couple part-time, but full-time people. And along the way, I've realized like the difference between what I was trying to do before that and full-time people. There's a huge difference between hiring a contract worker or a freelancer, like someone to do a project, and full-time, where with a project worker, you have 100% turnover. And with an hourly person, this is the big one that I didn't realize until recently. So an hourly person allows you to still be the grunt worker in your business, whereas a full-time person forces you to become the CEO.
Yeah.
And this was a subtle change that I didn't realize, but it happened a long time ago to me. So when I hired that first guy, you know, I was committed to him for 40 hours a week. He was committed to me for 40 hours a week. If I didn't keep him busy, then I was paying him for nothing. And that kind of flipped a switch for me where, oh, I gave him this thing. He's done with it. I have to give him something to do, which means I have to think about my business, not think in my business. And that's
that's a big transformation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the difference between hiring an hourly person and a full-time person. Like an hourly person, oh, they're done. I don't really care. You know, whatever. I get to keep my head down working in my business. A full-time person, I have to step up and outside and look at the business and work on the business instead of in the business so that he has something to do.
And of course, the flip side of that is a lot of business owners are frustrated because they don't get time to work on their business and they're always working in their business. So, you know, you've just provided the answer there. The answer is, you know, have full-time staff, basically.
Hire a full-time person. Just hire one person full-time and see what it does to you. Do you see what it does to your brain?
Yeah.
And your ability to run your business. It will change things.
So you kind of briefly touched on the recommendation you had to go to the Philippines. Why the Philippines? I know I've talked about this in some of the training that I've heard from you, but I think it's worth talking a little bit about that here.
Yeah, so I had no idea. I mean, when he recommended this to me, I don't think he knew what the difference was. But there's a whole set of cultural things that I've learned about over the years that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And it's not any individual thing here. It's kind of a combination of a whole bunch of things. So the Filipinos are honest and not, you know, it's a third world country. There's a lot of dishonest people. But when they're working with a foreign employer, they really, really want to be honest. And that's a kind of a uniquely Filipino thing where they look up to foreigners. So that's different. They're very loyal, almost to it being a fault of theirs, where like the first person I ever hired still works for me today, 14 years later. And he's amazing. When I hired him, he knew nothing. And today he's amazing because I've taught him so much stuff. And that's typically, as long as you treat someone well, they will not quit. They won't jump ship at the first higher salary offer, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. They're very westernized and not necessarily Americanized, but westernized. Like they think very Western. They speak very good English. They have computers and internet access. The infrastructure is reasonable in the Philippines, so you don't have to go through a service to hire them. And they're not entrepreneurial. They don't want to steal your business. So you combine all these things with the fact that the Philippines is a third world country. It's hard to find a full-time job there. You're paying them a reasonable wage. And they're a very pleasing people by nature. Like they want to please. That's why they so often work in the hospitality industry. And you just get this really, really good situation where they want to make you happy. They're willing to do all kinds of stuff to make that happen. They'll go above and beyond what you've asked them to do often. And it just leads to a different experience than elsewhere in the world.
Yeah. And I remember listening to one of your very early webinars where you went through, the reasons why choosing the Philippines outsourcing, and you touched on India and some of the issues that, there. And we won't talk about those today, but people can come and chat to me about that if they want to hear. But when I heard that, I thought, you're onto something here, because I've spent 23 years in my corporate career managing remote teams, and I spent quite a bit of time visiting the Philippines. I have good friends there that are customers and owners of fairly large companies there that I've worked with, and I thought, yes, that all ties in with my own experience that I've evolved over the years. So immediately I was kind of drawn to the idea of outsourcing to the Philippines. One of the things that you said in those early training things was start with one person and, start small and get your feet wet, test it all out. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I've got experience managing remote teams. So I ignored that advice and I went straight out and hired 3 people. It actually worked very well because I followed the rest of your advice, and I used my own experience as well. But one of the things that I think I see a lot of other people struggling with is working with remote teams. So tell us about some of the unique challenges in working with remote teams and what your advice is how to deal with those.
Yeah, so it's different when you're not sitting next to someone like in an office. And so I also think that working with a remote team requires a certain personality. And not that it's like a limited personality, but there are certain personalities it doesn't work for. And so the first time you do this, your goal should be to figure out, does this work for me and can I work with this person? So you're going to hire one person and you're going to get them started doing a task. And I would love to talk about what that task is. But you're going to get them doing this one task. And your goal there is to figure out, can I work with this person to accomplish this task? Where I don't do the work, they do the work. And when you do that, you kind of start to figure out, does this work for me? Because it doesn't work for everybody. So in working with a remote team, there's a couple things that I think will be very helpful. Number one is expectations. Realize that it's not going to work right the first time. You're going to have to work through issues. They are going to try really hard to do it right, but because you're not sitting in front of them, you're not pointing at things with them, you're not talking through it with them for an hour. Often your instructions won't be as good as you think they are. And they may not understand your instructions, and you'll be frustrated because they didn't understand your very, very clear instructions, which weren't so clear. And so I'm just saying it's going to take a little bit of work. This isn't a magic bullet thing that's going to change your life overnight. It's hard work at first. But if you make it work, we're talking about a full-time person for $450 a month who will do whatever you want. So we can get into tools, but that's my initial advice, is to see if this works for you, because it is different than working in an office. You have to communicate regularly. You need to be positive rather than like expecting things to be perfect. And when they're not perfect, you fire them because they suck.
Yeah.
That's not really the case.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that is the same really as having an employee in the same building or same office, because you have to invest in training them, you have to invest in building the relationship, you have to invest in communication. So to expect it to be different with remote teams is kind of unusual. But at the same time, there are challenges with remote teams that you don't have, as you say, you're not there all the time, so you can't get the quick question asked and answered.
Yeah, you don't. Here's a common one, super common one. They're not working. That's what I hear. Well, in an office, you see they're clearly working. They're sitting there at their desk. You can see them working. Where overseas, you can't see them working. And in an office, they walk, and especially this is a big cultural difference. So in the US, if someone doesn't understand, they'll come to you and say, "Hey, I don't get it. Walk me through this." In the Philippines, they won't do that. And so they're probably trying really hard to figure out whatever it is. If they're not working, if it appears to you they're not working, they're probably trying to work. Or there's some situation going on that if they were in your office, they would come talk to you about. They're not. And so they don't come talk to you about it, even though they could through email. The culture there is they don't want to let you down. They're shy. And so rather than saying something about the problem, they would rather disappear and not say anything. And so that's just, one of the cultural things that if you're prepared for it, you can work through this and know, oh yeah, I have to seek out, why aren't they working? Well, they actually are working. They're probably working really hard. They don't understand what's going on. And you just need to clarify with them. And that's different than what happens in an office.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you touched briefly on, how that it's important to pick the right first task. So talk to us about what first task somebody should be giving a new team member when they're outsourcing to someone in the Philippines.
Yeah, so I think most people would say find the stopping point of your business, or find the most important thing in your business and outsource that. And I don't think that's correct. I think the first thing that you should outsource is something you know how to do and something you're very capable of doing, and get someone else to do it for you, because that's how you get time back. You get someone else to do something that you are currently doing and teach them well so that they're doing it the way you want it done. And then you just bought time, which is, like the one thing you can't buy, except my experience is you can buy it. You just have to buy it differently. And I'll tell you that I work about 17 hours a week, and I've been in about 17 hours a week for like 10 years. So that first task is, you'll often hear people say, write things down that you do and see which of those things someone else could do. That's a great advice. Like write things down and then say, what can I teach someone else to do so I can get some time back? And then hire someone to do that one task and work with them through it. Give them training, give them feedback, tweak the system a little bit when it doesn't work until you get it right. And then once you get it right, now you and them understand each other really well, and you've already given them a whole bunch of training. Now you can teach them to do a second task and start getting a little bit more time back. And yes, this training and working with them takes time, and it takes more time than just to do it yourself, but it also pays off 100 times over. That's the first task.
That's a real critical point. It does pay off hundreds of times over. And I've seen so many people kind of get to the point of having, I could do it so much quicker myself, and they just stop at that point rather than really invest that time up front. Because as you say, once you get through that first task, and my experience is once you work with somebody through that first task, they get to understand your style and your expectations and the standards that you've set. And, clever people, and a lot of the Filipinos are very clever, the ones we hire certainly are, they will recognize patterns, and they will recognize, this is similar. When there's a new task, this is similar to what we did over here. And the learning becomes much faster the further you go into the whole process.
Yes. Yeah. You are exactly on. Yeah.
And the other thing that, you talked about recording the tasks you do or documenting. One of the things, and I think this might have come from your training, although I have heard many other people say this, and we do it as a rule now in our and I have my team do it as a rule, that anything that we don't already have well documented, we do a screencast video of ourselves doing that task, regardless of what it is. So there's a rule. What videos did you record today is one of the questions.
That's interesting.
So we keep collecting screencast videos of the processes, and they then eventually get turned into well-documented processes that anybody can do that, you train in that particular task.
That's interesting. I haven't done that. I haven't done the what video did you record today. That's cool. Let me offer a different perspective on that. And this goes contrary to what everybody else says. But I don't document my processes super well. I have in the past, and I don't anymore. And obviously, some things get documented. Some things get, But I have never had an important worker quit. And that probably makes me a little bit lazy in my documenting, because they don't quit, because, obviously someone could get, as the saying goes, hit by a bus. But if you treat people well, the Philippines has this interesting loyalty thing where they don't quit. And I'm not religious about my documenting, and it has never hurt me yet. That's not to say it's not going to, because I'm sure it will at some point. But yeah, different perspective.
That's interesting. Yeah. I guess I take the philosophy and I work with my team to get them to input into the process. In fact, a lot of the processes, I don't even know the process. And they've documented, and I said, well, if it works and the result is exactly what I expect and to the standard I expect, then yeah, that's good. I'm happy. But what I guess, there's the aspect of if somebody gets hit by a bus, but there's also the aspect of when we scale, when we add new team members, there's something there that can be used as a training resource.
Yeah. And, I think maybe for me, we don't have that many well, I mean, you know what? You're probably right. The processes that we have that are like dependent on us are pretty well documented. A lot of what we do is like internet processes, and those change. They change so quickly. But yeah, you're probably right. I mean, as I think more about this, I would think, yeah, that's documented. Yeah, that's documented. Yeah, you're right.
All right. Now, what do you think is the most important skill set to hire for in a remote team member? So we've talked a little bit about the challenges of a remote team. We've talked about the unique perspectives and benefits that Filipinos bring to this particular environment. What do you think is the most important skill set when you're going out and hiring?
So I think there's two things, actually, probably three things. I mean, just generally, I would say English. Right? I mean, you can teach someone to do all kinds of stuff. You can't teach English, or it's not worth it to teach it. But that also depends on what you're having them do. Like a programmer, English in the Philippines is completely unimportant, because you'll never have a communication issue with them. Whether or not their English is fluent doesn't really matter, or any technical position for that matter. But if they're going to be doing writing or communicating with customers or whatever, English is pretty dang important. But in my experience, more important than English is, I want to say, dedication and attention to detail. So let me tell you my recruiting process really quickly, and this will kind of explain this. So I don't do Skype interviews when I recruit. I don't do any voice interviews, mostly because they don't want to do it. Filipinos are shy. They are scared. They are worried you won't understand them, even if they have perfect English. They may not have a microphone or a webcam or whatever. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they will schedule an interview with you and then not show up. So instead of doing Skype interview when I recruit, I do email. I send them lots of emails with 1 to 5 questions in each one. And the purpose behind that is I get to see all kinds of things in that communication that are very typical of a normal work day or a normal like working process. So, for example, it's reasonable to have your friend help you write your online jobs profile. It's not reasonable to have your friend help you respond to 10 emails over 5 days, right? So I get to see their English. I get to see how they handle slang. I get to see how, their grasp of things. I get to see the oddities in their language. Then I also get to see how quickly do they respond. If I send them an email today, do they respond tonight? Or do they respond 3 days from now? And that's a really big deal for me in working with a virtual team. If it takes them 3 days to respond during recruiting, it's probably going to take them 3 days to respond after I've hired them. And that doesn't work for me in a virtual environment. Also, if I ask them 4 questions in an email and they only respond to 3 of them, well, the chances of them only doing 3 tasks that I asked them when I asked them to do 4 after I've hired them is really high. And the way I work, that doesn't work for me. I don't want to follow up on these tasks. I just want them to get done. And so in doing this process, I get to see all kinds of things about their personality and what works for me and what's important in working with a virtual team. And I also usually find that people drop out during the recruiting process with this. So that's kind of how I find good people who work for me, who work like my personality.
Yeah, that's interesting, and there is a fair bit of self-selection there, isn't there? Once you get through that, and particularly if you said 10 emails, and somebody perseveres through those 10 emails and responds in a way that meets your needs, then that's a really good sign, isn't it?
Yeah. I also get to see their personality really well. And usually in doing this process, you spend enough time thinking about someone and interacting that you get a gut feeling, and that's usually how I end up deciding. Most people drop out during the process and I'll end up with 1 or 2 or 3 and I have a gut feeling of who I should hire.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you have 24 people currently employed. Is there a structure to them? Is there, or to the team? Is there a lot of interaction between them?
Yeah. So, they definitely communicate among themselves. For example, we have programmers, designers, web people, and they communicate a lot with each other. And I communicate a lot with them. We have the other side, like a customer support and an admin team, and my partner communicates a lot with them. We have content marketing, content writing, social media team, and those people all communicate with each other. Other than communicating with each other and communicating with me, we don't have necessarily a hierarchy in our organization. I don't have a project manager and someone who oversees this or that. I have people that have responsibilities of things, and they drive processes that they work on and other people work on. But we don't really have a hierarchy in our team.
Okay. And in terms of location, I imagine they're spread all throughout the Philippines in different areas.
Yeah. I tried hiring all in the same place, and it was just too complicated. We're like, oh, here's this really great person who this is the skill set I want. They're not in that place. I'm going to hire them anyway.
Yeah. So how do you build a sense of culture within the team?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like we have a sense of culture, but I don't know how we built it. I don't know.
So how often do you visit the team or bring them all together?
Yeah, that's not a good question for me, man. Okay. I've only been to the Philippines once. I went there in 2010. It's been 9 years since I've been to see my team, and I long to go back there, and I feel regularly that I should go back there, and I don't. And probably only because I really, really hate being away from my family. And so, I have a wife and 5 kids, and the thought of leaving them for 2 weeks or a week, or the thought of going on 25 hours of travel for a week of being away from my family just sounds like torture. So, but I will tell you this. If you have a chance to meet your team, it is amazing. And because I've done it, and it's amazing. And then I get feedback from other people regularly who do it, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's spent nearly 30 years, a third of my corporate career throughout the year traveling when I had a young family, I can definitely empathize with that. It's a real torture being away from your family for 2-3 weeks at a time. And people kept saying to me, "Oh, you have the dream job. You're traveling all over the world, seeing these different places." And I said, "Yeah, I see lots of airports and lots of hotels and lots of meeting rooms. But whilst it was fun dealing with all the different people, it can be a drag." But having said that, I agree that it really is, adds huge value to actually physically meet with your outsourced teams. And now that my kids are grown-up adults and independent, it's much easier for me, or much less torturous for me. And I've been in the Philippines about 4 times in the last 2 years. And, met up with the team, and it makes a lot of difference. I've actually done the last few hires in person with in-person interviews, and that's certainly a completely different level, because you just build a relationship up front straight away with the people, and it kind of kicks it up to another level.
Oh, I'm so jealous. That sounds so awesome.
So what are your thoughts on having people work from home versus placing them in offices? Because I know I've basically transitioned to having people in offices now, and the major reason for that is around reliability of power and internet connections. There's a secondary benefit there, that they're in shared offices where there's lots of other people working for different companies, so they make friends and they get kind of a social interaction that you have from offices. But I know, there was a recent blog that you had one of your team write about the benefits of working from home and, being with family and so on.
Yeah, she actually came to me with that. Like, she wanted to write that. But everything you said is correct. They have these, they're a very social people, and they have these feelings of loneliness, and so working at home can be hard. We have talked to our team and said, if you need to work in a remote place, that's fine. We can help pay for whatever that space costs. But generally, our people work from home. And the power and internet outages, I don't know, maybe you've found different, but we've found that the power outages, with power going out, internet goes out. And with internet out, it doesn't matter what power you have.
Yeah.
So you can have a backup generator or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's not really helpful. So yeah, all of our people work from home, unless they need to go into some place, and then we help pay for it. But otherwise, yeah.
All right. So let's come back to the training aspect. I know you've in the past built membership sites where you provided that training. I think one of the interesting things for me is documenting these processes. Actually, if you're consistent about that, all of a sudden you have all this training material that you could actually use for other businesses, so you can serve a similar market rather than just using them internally. So initially you had that as part of your business model, but you're not doing that any longer, right?
Right. Yeah, we're not. I mean, it's something that as the more I got into the Philippines, the less I had energy to keep up on other processes. And so I wasn't able to maintain those trainings. And we're working on building trainings with other people now, having other people build the trainings, or people who are experts in fields getting their trainings to give to people in the Philippines. The one thing you have to be careful about, it's great if you create the training, there's no issue. If you're buying someone else's training, you have to be really careful. If you just give that to someone in the Philippines, they don't want to disappoint you. And if you give them something that tells them to do something, even if that thing is not relevant to your business, they'll feel like you want them to do it. And then you create this situation where they don't know what to do. They don't want to let you down. They disappear. So, creating trainings yourself, great. Buying trainings, you just have to be careful. You have to go through the trainings yourself and filter whatever is good or not, which hopefully you can do that now that you know that someone else is going to do the implementing. Yeah. If you're not doing the implementing, that's a big difference from a training online and being able to go through it versus you knowing you have to do the implementing and having the guilt of knowing I'm not going to implement this because I don't have the time. And so you don't even read whatever you just bought.
That brings up a couple of really interesting points. I mean, the first one that strikes me there is how important communication is in general, but in this situation where you're working with somebody from a different culture with perhaps different mother language and also remotely, the importance of communication is absolutely critical, and giving them something that is a training program that you may not have looked at and saying, take a look at this and let me know what you think is perhaps clear to somebody in the same culture as you, but to a remote person and a Filipino, it might mean, as you say, do this exactly the way it's written.
Yeah, and along with that, a big problem that I see is every training that I've ever seen is intended for the business owner. Like every internet training, like here's how to do this marketing thing, whatever. They're always speaking towards the business owner as if they're going to be the implementer. They never talk about, here, you need to make this decision and then give this to your staff. That's not how the training is built, right? Because it's hard to build training like that. Yeah. And so when you give the not business owner the training intended for the business owner, it just creates all kinds of problems.
That's right. So I tend to approach those sort of things. I don't quite follow the process that you suggested in terms of looking at the training myself. Sometimes I do, but sometimes it's just a case of the time is out. But I make it very clear. I give it to somebody to take a look at, and I make it very clear, I want you to take a look at this and then let me know what you think. And then let's schedule a time where we can have a conversation about it. So that's always the process. And then we have a conversation about it. And in that conversation, the people I have are very good. They will then raise concerns that they might have about it or questions that they have about it. And then I can determine whether I can let it go as is. If they say, this is really great stuff, I'm really clear about this, and here are I'll ask them what are the benefits and what can we implement. And if that's really clear, then I let them go. If there's lots of questions and so on, then I dig deeper.
Yeah. So what I love about that is there's different ways of doing things, you know, and you know, my recruiting process is my recruiting process. It's not the recruiting process everybody uses. I just speak from my personal experience, and I love that you do it differently than I do. That's awesome.
Yeah. And of course, I've learned so much from you when I first started in particular. So, you know, I've just adapted from there based on things I've learned in the meantime and things I've learned in my previous corporate career where I was working with remote teams as well.
Yeah, great.
So, tell us a little bit more about OnlineJobs.ph specifically. I know that's, you know, it's a marketplace where if somebody is interested in hiring workers in the Philippines, that's a really good resource to get started.
Yeah. So when I was way back when I was hiring, the only option was to go through an agency and pay the markup. And, like I said, I was paying them $750. They were paying them $250. And that's fine. It's not the worst situation. It just didn't sit super well with me, And then, that was a $6,000 a year difference. Today, that difference is quite a bit more. Usually it's like $1,500 a month difference. And so at one point I just said, I think there's got to be a better way to find people than be only given one option. Like, here's your one person. And that stinks. So I decided to build OnlineJobs.ph as like a test to see, can I get a couple hundred people here who I can recruit from? And then it blew up, and we had like a couple hundred people in the first month, and then a couple thousand people. And today there's over 500,000 people there where you can go on and search through resumes and look at the skills, which is what I recommend people do. Like, just go and look. Just looking at the skills will open your eyes to a new world of what's possible. Like, here are all these people with all these skills. It'll tell you exactly how much they're looking to make. And that amount is very affordable. Like full-time people starting around $400 a month. And, then you just look at all the skills and see. With over 500,000 resumes, you can find just about anything. Anything that can be done online or on the phone, you can find.
Yeah.
And with online jobs, one of the things we've been very careful with is to not become like Upwork, where we're not involved in the process. We're not forcing you to stay on our platform. We put you in contact with the workers, and that's it. And we're done. So there's a fee to access the contact information of the workers. It's pretty reasonable. And then we don't take a cut of their salary. We don't get involved. We're not incentivized at that point to charge you more. So you pay their actual salary, what they're actually looking for. They get what you pay them. It's a good situation. So,
yeah, it's a great service, and as you say, it's really just the jobs board that you access. And once you make a decision to employ somebody, then it's an arrangement between you and them.
Yeah, and that process can be as quick as like 2 hours. Like, you go on and contact someone, and they can say yes. Yeah, I'm interested. When can you start working? Right now, right? You could have someone like later today, or it could take you a week of like really, really detailed interviewing. But then it's just you and them.
Yeah,
we're not involved. You don't pay us anymore. So,
all right. Well, this is fascinating. I could go on and talk outsourcing for hours, but I'm respectful of your time. So I think it's time we moved on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience. And they're primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. So we've got 5 questions that hopefully you'll give us some insightful answers that will inspire everyone to do something awesome today.
Great.
So number 1 is what's the number 1 thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Think. One of the things that I see that people often lack the willingness to do is think through the really, really hard things. So like, someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to build a website. Well, what do you want? Well, I just want a website. It just needs my information. Well, like what? What does it look like? How does it perform? What does it do? I don't know. Well, that's the thing. You want to be more innovative. You want to move business forward. You have to think. You got to think through those hard processes that you don't want to think through. But that's what drives business forward. Is that hard thinking.
Yeah, I like that, and I think it's you asked a lot of questions there in that example. I think asking questions to the point where you get to that boundary condition of I don't know. So that, and pushing through that to really.
And that's like that's what I do the most in my business now. I only work 17 hours a week, I said. But I push myself to that boundary. I don't know, oh crap, this sucks. Now is when I have to think and come up with a solution. And that's the hard work.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of neatly leads into the next question, which is, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I mean, beyond what we just talked about, I don't know.
Well, yeah, maybe you answered the question. Yeah. So really thinking through the hard things and asking lots of questions.
Yeah. And I'll get feedback from my team. I'll ask them for their input and their ideas.
Yeah. And that's one of the beauties of having, particularly if you've got a team of 24, of having so many other people that have eyes on your business is getting feedback from people with different perspectives.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what's one of the resources you use most often?
Resources like tools?
Yeah.
So let me tell you what I don't use. I don't use social media. And that's probably I don't use my computer. Okay, here.
Oh.
When I sit in front of my computer, my time, that's like sacred time to me almost. My computer time is used only for getting my work done. I don't look at YouTube. I don't look at Facebook. Have you seen that most recent video? No, I haven't seen it. I work. That's all I do. And so when you ask what resources do I use, that's one, is protecting my time at my computer so that my time is super, super efficient. I do use Basecamp, which I love Basecamp for project management. I love the way it works. It works really well with my brain. And I don't use Gmail. I don't want Google having any more of my data than they can already get.
So you do all the communication through Basecamp as well?
Yeah. Basecamp.
All right. Another one that leads directly off of that is, what's the best way to keep a project on track?
Have someone else do the work. Yeah, I mean, that's my big thing is I'm going to have someone else do the work so that I can focus on 2, 3, 4, 5 different projects. And I can keep them pushing on track by just giving people feedback, and I don't ever do any of the work in any of the projects.
Yeah, well, that's definitely the model that you're working through. So, and that obviously it's working.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, but over the years, I have always found myself doing the opposite of what most people say. So most conventional wisdom says, do this. If you tell me to do this, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go do it. Unless it totally makes sense, unless I can see a reasoning behind why I should, whatever. Yeah, like I see, for example, a lot of people will say, go into business with what you love. And then I go into a local bike shop and I see people working in the bike shop. They don't ride their bikes. They just work on bikes, right?
That's a really good point.
They're not doing what they love, but they followed that advice of, nobody loves outsourcing, right? Nobody wants to follow a podcast about outsourcing alone, right? Like one time, it's great. So I do the opposite. I do what makes sense and leave out what other people's advice is.
Yeah.
That may not be the best way to differentiate yourself, but
well, it certainly does differentiate you. One of the things that strikes me, though, is it does require, and a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners don't have this, they suffer from imposter syndrome, and it requires a certain level of confidence, doesn't it? To say, yeah, I know this is what the standard advice is, but I'm going to do it different.
Yeah, it does. And then to work through that different way.
All right. Well, thanks, John. This has been really great. Where can people reach out and say thank you for what you've shared today?
So I am available through email. If you use the contact us link on OnlineJobs.ph, you will get me. Actually, that's not true. You won't get me, but if you say this is for John, then it will get to me. All of our support people know, send it to me.
Yeah.
I am also available on Facebook. If you contact me on Facebook, I will get it. It may take me a couple of days because I don't check it. Usually it requires one of my team to see it and tell me, hey, you should go check Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So you've even outsourced the social media part.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Fabulous. All right. So what's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any business owner who wants to be a leader in their field and in innovation?
Take a risk. Take a risk, whether that risk is doing something controversial or whether that risk is taking a leap financially or whether that risk is, like we talked about today, hire someone in the Philippines. Take a risk. Great things aren't achieved without risk.
Yeah, pushing the boundaries. All right. Then finally, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast and why?
I don't have an answer.
All right. Well, we might touch base with you later.
Yeah, one of my things that I have no information in my life. I get no news. I get no pop culture. I get no. Someone told me a while ago that the world's information are in blog posts. The world's wisdom is in books. So I don't really read anything online. I read books. And who would you interview? Man, I don't know. Sorry.
So what's a good book you've read recently?
I read Brain Makers recently. It's about how our diet affects our brain's performance and how so much of modern disease comes from our diet.
That sounds fascinating. Well, we might check out who. Do you know who the author is?
Yeah, I think it's Paternoster. I think that's his last name. He's a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We might go explore that and see if we can get him on the podcast. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and insights with us today, John. I've really enjoyed this and made a lot of notes. And as I said at the beginning, I've been following you for quite some time and you got me started in outsourcing to the Philippines. So I'm very appreciative of that. And I'm glad I had the opportunity today to connect with you and to learn a lot more about your philosophy and how OnlineJobs.ph and all your business came about. So thanks again. I wish you all the best for the future and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed that fascinating and informative conversation with John and, like me, found a lot of value in the information he shared. John has a core philosophy of fiercely protecting his time for the things that are important to him, and his work with remote teams is reflective of that. There are so many valuable tips and lessons for people working with remote teams that John shared in this episode. I'd love to know what you took away from John's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at InnovaBizz.co/John Jonas. That is JOHNJONAS. All lowercase, all one word, InnovaBizz.co/John Jonas. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with John there, as well as links to his website, his blog, and OnlineJobs.ph. John is an avid book reader and mentioned the book Brainmaker, The Power of Gut Microbes to Heal and Protect Your Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter. we might invite David to a future InnovaBuzz podcast to learn more. Remember to visit InnovaBuzz.co/VIP to access the Transformational Marketing Hub and all its free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. Stay connected. Head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or Pocket Casts and subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you make sure you'll never miss another episode. We'd also love you to leave us a review because what you think matters. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions or questions, share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic LinkedIn community at the Transformational Marketing Academy. All you have to do is go to InnovaBizz.co/TMAC. It's free to join. Hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBizz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.